Welcome to the Optimal Bio podcast. At Optimal Bio, we don't just balance your hormones, we balance your whole body. Our conversations range from nutrition to medicine with an emphasis on wellness tips to support your health journey. If you like what you hear, find us on the web at optimalbio.com and follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Optimal Bio's Wellness Podcast. Today, we are honored to have Shannon Converse, one of our providers in our new location in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, join us today. Welcome, Shannon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have a clear Wi-Fi connection today. So
Yes.
Hopefully you're in a comfortable location and we can give this a go for the audience. We tried yesterday and, we ran into a number of problems. So hopefully today we're much better in terms of quality and broadcast. So as we always do with most of our guests, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Colorado, spent most of my life there, but I did go to grad school in Northern California. So moving here to the Charleston area was about a year and a half ago with my family. And as far as my medical background, I have a bachelor's in psychology and then a bachelor's and a master's in nursing. I'm a family nurse practitioner. And as a RN, I worked mostly in the ER. And then as a nurse practitioner, I've kind of done a variety of things. So I started in community health, and then I did a lot of family medicine, primary care, but also urgent care and women's health. And also have done some stints making house calls. And when we moved here, I was in the process over the past few years, I guess, over the last 5 years of kind of making more of a transition into more nutrition and holistic and wellness-based learning and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with that. And so when I found Optimal Bio, it seemed like a very good fit for everything I'd been learning and believing and wanting to do.
So when you were, growing up, high school, college timeframe, did you know you wanted to get into the medical world?
Definitely not. I can't say I really thought about what I don't know. I think back about what I would have done if I hadn't done this, and I'm really not sure. I was super into photography, super into traveling, probably some sort of like photojournalist thing is probably what I would have done. But medicine, no. My mom passed away when I was in high school, and I think that was kind of a turning point in terms of being interested in, life and health and all of those things. And so in college, I ended up taking an EMT course, and that just sort of started the ball rolling, and was pre-med during my first bachelor's degree and wasn't sure if I wanted to go to medical school, be a PA, be an NP. But I think all along kind of that more like holistic care is why the nurse practitioner was a better fit for me even back then. And I also knew I wanted a family and wanted some flexibility. And so it was a good call.
Yeah. It's kind of funny how, life takes you in certain directions. And, I was in the headhunting business, and my father passed and died of cancer, after being diagnosed, 2 months earlier. And that eventually steered our business into, becoming a contract research organization where we do clinical trial work for pharmaceutical. And of course, we focused on oncology. So when you have that extra purpose, I think that helps, anybody, in general with just simply having a purpose in life, but also from a business perspective, trying to, do high quality work and hopefully, through our research, getting some drugs approved, we eventually save some lives of people that otherwise, might not have made it.
It's a great mix for me too. I love being a nurse practitioner because I can reinvent myself a million times, which I have already and will continue to do. There's really no end to, if I can find someone to teach it to me and then show that I can do it, there's really no limit to anything that I'm allowed to do. And I love that. So for me, having flexibility and being able to kind of reinvent myself over and over again is great. And in that way, this is the best career choice for me.
So where'd you go to college?
I got a bachelor's degree from the University of Denver, and then I went to Samuel Merritt University for a bachelor's and master's, and that's in the Bay Area.
Denver has a pretty good, hockey and lacrosse team?
Yes, very fun. We had a lot of hockey games.
So you did have some fun in college. You weren't just doing EMT the whole time.
Absolutely. No, I did work. I worked at the hospital I was a phlebotomist for a while. I was a ER patient care tech. And then at one point I was a patient transporter. So I would work in the middle of the night, either drawing blood or taking patients from their room or the ER to their MRI. And then I'd roll into chemistry class at 7:30 a.m. And it was a little brutal, but got through it.
So when you're going through that time frame and you're doing, it sounds like you have multiple, jobs, during that time, what was the most interesting and most fun for you?
I mean, ER is always the most fun. It just is. And I've really only worked in like a true trauma center once. And that I would say is not as fun. It's really fascinating, but obviously more stressful. Being in an emergency department, though, is like it draws a different crowd. It's a different, they call ER docs the backpacker specials sometimes. I think it's a lot of people who are really active and adventurous and fun. And so it's just inherently always been a great group to work with. And it's also just so different from primary care where, you're in the moment able to help somebody with what they're going through, but it isn't all of the like follow through and all of the management over time. And so it was kind of a good balance to not have kind of chronic management and to get to do more acute care things. I really liked that. Very task oriented, which I love, and also procedure oriented, which I love.
Is the real life ER similar to the TV ER?
No, not at all. No.
Yeah. I think we all try to avoid the ER, but sometimes when we go, it's a lot of waiting around. And, I know they take the trauma patients through the back door, so to speak, but it seems to me today it's kind of a chaotic, scenario there. It seems like you have a lot of what I would call, 1099 docs. They're not really associated with the hospital. And it's, there's no beds sometimes, not because they're busy. It's just simply there's just not enough staff to staff the beds. So it just takes, the ER seems to be almost like a holding pen. Yeah.
Yeah. Trying to put everybody places is no fun.
You were, doing that back then. I mean, was it different, than what you think, what it is now?
No, it's been a long time, but it seems to me that now, especially like as far as the wait that you were talking about to be seen and things like that, now like you can get online and look up how long's the wait to be seen. And I think maybe technology has helped a little bit, but it's been a long time since I worked in the ER. So I'm not sure I can say.
It almost seems like there's a lot more urgent cares now too. So they're, trying to push.
Yes, that has to help big time.
Yeah. What about when you were riding in the ambulance? I mean, any cool stories, when you got called?
Yeah, so at the time I was in Durango, Colorado, and it sits between two major reservations. And so that makes for some interesting healthcare and just, learning a lot of cultural sensitivity things too. And a lot of rural calls, but also it's an area where weather can be really volatile. So I do remember a couple of nights with, there was a 50 car pileup in an icy road on a pass, and it was really scary. But it's pretty. I have the utmost respect for the EMS, the whole system, because they really put themselves in danger, and it was adventurous for sure.
So you graduate college, and then you have the psych degree at this point in time, right? So then what do you have to do after that to, become what you are today?
So I was a pre-med bio major most of the time, and I switched to psychology sort of last minute because I had most of the prereqs for med school or NP school at that point anyway. And then I noticed that the classes I was really enjoying were more like sociology and psychology. And I didn't want to take kind of any more physics and biochem than I had to. So I just I made a switch in my major to be able to take kind of those upper level other classes that were more fascinating to me. And I think that's really served me well. I don't know anyone who's gotten a degree in psychology who doesn't feel that it's sort of, no matter what you do, a good thing just to have kind of a deeper understanding of people and how we work. So I'm glad I made that call. But I did need to go do, I think, 1 or 2 prerequisites at University of Colorado after that were specific to the programs I applied to. And so I pretty much, I think I only spent less than a year after college before I moved to California to go to to go to school for nursing, and I did a dual program where it was an RN to NP. So it was all in one. It took, I don't know, about 4 years. And then I worked as an RN while I was finishing my NP. As soon as I was done with that, I got married during that time, and we moved home to Colorado right after I graduated. So pretty much all of my work was in Colorado before we moved here.
And did the school choice cause the move to the West Coast, or was it for other reasons?
No, I just, I love Northern and Southern California. I knew I wanted to go somewhere for a while, assuming that, once we got married and have kids, we would move back home to Colorado. And it just seemed like the right time to spend some time living somewhere else. And the school itself was just perfect for me. It's small. It's really, it was a fast track intensive program, but really had a great history and well done. They're good at picking out clinical sites, which is such a huge battle for a lot of schools. And just seemed like a really great place to be, to learn in terms of diversity too. Just being in the Bay Area was awesome for that also. So it was more just time to spend a good couple of years living somewhere else.
And when were you there? What was it, like early 2000s or?
Yeah, 2004 to 2008.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
I can't say that I missed the weather. That is the one thing. That was kind of rough, but other than that, it was great.
Yeah, we had an office in South San Francisco during that time, so I'd get out there on a regular basis, and we were kind of on the cusp of, if we just went maybe 5 or 10 minutes south, it was a lot warmer.
Yeah, on the East Bay side, the Oakland side is much better weather, so that's actually where I lived, and that was a good call.
It's just beautiful out there, and hopefully they can, continue to maintain that standard of living, that lifestyle out there. All right, so you were during this prime time too. I think I know you a little bit. You had mentioned that you did take some classes in nutrition or cooking or what have you. So, can you walk us through that?
Sure. So after, I guess it would have been after about 12 years or so of working in kind of a more traditional variety of environments, whether it was in primary care or women's health. The more I learned about what I wanted for my family and my health and my kids as they were babies, looking into like what products are good and what should they be eating and all of those things, I started realizing, gosh, you know what? I really don't know. I don't know well enough what I want for my own family. And that in turn means I don't know well enough to guide my patients in a way that I feel good about also. So the more I started to question things, the more at first I thought I was just going to go learn a little bit more and integrate it into what I was currently doing. But the more I learned, the more I realized I really wasn't in alignment in general with what I was doing. And so I actually quit my job as a nurse practitioner, and I sort of did this year of self-discovery where I took a really great course from the Functional Nutrition Alliance it's called the Full Body Systems, and it was a completely new way for me to learn like anatomy, physiology, pharmacology from a more holistic approach surrounding the basis of food mostly, and how those systems can be supported by nutrition and by herbs, and it was just a really awesome class. And then I went to the Nutrition Therapy Institute in Denver, took a class, a certificate program called the Natural Food Chef. So 3 days a week, there were, I think, 10 of us in a commercial kitchen where the morning was kind of classroom time where we were learning about, again, like what nutrients and what foods best support the body system. And then also about like recipe combining, food combining, what cooking methods, do we really need to think about to not, there's so many things that, you can buy all of this beautiful, awesome organic food and then break all the nutrients apart in the way that you cook them. And so it was really kind of about that, what things to use in the kitchen and what cooking methods help preserve nutrients. And so it was a really awesome time. I learned a lot, and I learned a lot about myself and changed a lot of things for our family, and it was great.
Now, during that time, were your kids still on baby food, or were they older at that point in time?
Yeah, no, currently they are 10, 12, and 15. So I think my oldest was about 10. So about 10, 7, and 5, I guess.
So you were making your own baby food then?
Nope. I dabbled with that a little bit with them when they were younger, but again, it was like I didn't know what I was doing. So it's more just trying to pack lunches for kids and not have it be full of preservatives and make it something they will actually eat is really tough. And I was really struggling to do that. And also I had one that was pretty like sensory sensitive with food. And so textures were a big deal. And one was really picky. And I really had this goal of I'm only making one meal. I'm not making 3 different meals. I can't do this. So that was kind of my goal. And we definitely got there. And their variety of what they eat and all of those things exploded. And, sometimes it's still hard, but for the most part, they're easy now.
So what's a typical lunch meal for your kids, in that brown bag or that lunch box that's going to school?
Yeah. So usually a lot of leftovers. So like we'll put, say they had Caesar salad the night before, I'll put that in. And then usually some leftover chicken and then some fruit, some nuts or seeds. And then they get to pick their snack. Like they'll pick whatever, bag of popcorn or something. But I try to have a veggie and a fruit and a protein. And then sometimes they'll throw in some side treat or whatever. But at least I know the majority of what they're eating is something I've chosen. And the bigger thing is no one in my family tolerates dairy very well. So that's a really hard thing about school lunches too. And that's the other reason that I just had to find a way to be able to pack it ourselves.
So one of the tricks I think I'm picking up on is, you make enough for meals, dinners, and then the leftovers are for lunch. So you're not recreating the wheel every single day with a different, lunch recipe, so to speak.
Right, which works great with my kids and my husband, but I am notorious for not liking leftovers. So it's like, I make them all their lunches and then I'm like, I think I'll go out to lunch now. So
that's another thing too. When you go out to lunch, what should, our listeners look for, when they're going out to lunch? Like what are the hidden time bombs or the hidden bombs of what might be considered nutritious, but isn't really, what do you recommend?
We love finding restaurants that pride themselves in buying locally. So maybe more kind of like the farm fresh menus where they have a new menu depending on what's in season. I think that speaks to the chef or whoever really kind of knowing what they're doing and looking for what's in season and what's healthier. But we also just kind of have a family policy that we're really trying to get better at all the time, which is to find out ahead or keep track of like which restaurants send you home with a to-go box that's styrofoam or bring you a styrofoam cup, things like that we're really trying to avoid also, not only just health, but environmentally. So I think those are the big things. We don't go out to eat that much here. I know people are going to be like, oh, when I say this, because it's Charleston, but I'm not, I'm struggling to find our restaurants here anyway. So we eat at home a lot.
Yeah, there are some great restaurants in Charleston.
Yeah, I got to get out a little more, but so far we have a few, but we try to, I always look up the menu ahead of time for sure.
So let's kind of go through this whole cooking thing and, is raw better than cooking?
That depends on what you're eating and what you're choosing it for. So there are some people who maybe have gut things that tolerate a raw diet better. The opposite is also true. There are a lot of people who are too sensitive to a whole raw diet. And I think that it really depends on also are you vegan or vegetarian? That plays a big role in how much raw you would probably eat. It's not that cooking is bad for foods. It's the best example is, people will say steam broccoli and they don't realize that all of the nutrients go into the water. And so roasting it is a much better way to eat broccoli because you don't lose all of those nutrients and in the steaming process. It's things like that. But the other thing that I'm pretty passionate about as far as food is kind of what I call the homemade pantry, where I also, when I was working and had kids full time, thought that making your own things at home was time consuming and maybe not possible for me. But what I learned was that if I replaced just a few of our pantry staples that were maybe the most processed and found an easier way to do that I felt so much better about that. So the little things like nut milk and nut butters, for example, or making our own sauces or salad, things that are notorious for having a lot of preservatives in them. We kind of have a repertoire of things that we make ourselves at home now. And it's fun to do. I really enjoy it, but it also makes me feel a lot better about what we're eating.
So I never heard that before about the steamed broccoli. So explain why the steam would blow out the nutrients and grilling a...
Well, have you ever noticed how even if it's in a steam basket, like when you throw the water into the sink, it's green, all that chlorophyll and all those. Yeah. So those are all the nutrients, and steaming, it's just too high of a temperature, and it makes it, the moisture pulls it down into the water. And so most of the main nutrients from broccoli get lost in that process. I mean, you can like lightly steam it, but for the most part, that's true of all vegetables, as cooked vegetables are much better not steamed. And so the other things are like what you're cooking with. One of the big things we learned in my other program was like, what is safe cookware, and what about nonstick cookware and all of this stuff. There's so many chemicals and so much kind of that greenwashing in marketing of products, where they'll say like, oh, it's non-toxic coating, but it's an aluminum core or something like that. So we dug into a lot of those things to try and look at, what are like healthier things to have in our kitchen to also not be like leaching toxins into our food, and little stuff, switching over from plastic containers to glass, for example. Those are just some of the little things that we implemented.
So when you see those advertisements for these like no stick pans, and they're basically they can make anything in them, and they're they can wipe it away with a paper towel and that's it. That's probably, so are you saying that that's potentially could be a lot of toxins going into that individual who's eating food from that pan?
Yes, and this goes back to my childhood too. It's one of those things where we had cockatiels growing up, and I remember when we got them, the person we got them from was like, "Do not ever cook with nonstick pans, or the birds will die from like a toxic fume that those pans release." And we're like, "What?" And that was Teflon. And so they now have made a lot of products that they, consider to be safer or Teflon alternatives. But like I said, they usually wrap them around something for price that's cheaper. So it's one of those things. I have a love-hate with cast iron also. It's great for your health, but it's also impossible to take care of, I feel like, not being able to, you have to season it and all of that. I don't have the best of luck with it, but I do have some of that. And then stainless steel and things like that, where, it's not nonstick, but you learn how to cook better with whether it's, some avocado oil or whatever it is you choose. It is a little trickier, but when you dig into just how bad all of that stuff is for you, or you realize that you're trying really hard to improve your health or spending a ton of money on like these high quality foods, and then you sort of ruin it by what pan you put them in.
Is it true too that I read somewhere once where if you're cooking in an iron skillet, for example, you're naturally, the body's going to get more iron?
Yeah, that's true. I don't know that and it depends on the quality of the cast iron and how often you're using it. I mean, I think that's great for people who maybe already suffer from, iron stores and absorption of iron from, say, nutrients and from their food, or people who are on like an elemental iron because they have maybe gut absorption issues. Like any place where you can get more of it certainly couldn't hurt. But to my knowledge, I don't think it's like profound enough that you can, say not need to take iron if you need it because you're cooking in cast iron, but it's a nice adjunct. Right. Sure.
And then suddenly you see somebody scraping the iron off the cask and ingesting it.
Right. Yeah.
And rule of thumb with an iron skillet too is not to use soap and water to clean it, correct?
Absolutely. Right. Like you're just supposed to you can use water, wipe it, or they have like those little kind of rubber spatulas that you can kind of scrape stuff off of it. But then, you just clean it off and then put some more oil or whatever you use on it.
So back to vegetables, if you're going to use water to cook the vegetables, is the rule of thumb, if the water's clear afterwards and you cooked it properly and you have enough nutrients still left in your vegetables, is that a fair assumption or no?
Yeah. I mean, I do, like I said, I have one kid who's pretty sensory. So one of them doesn't like roasted broccoli, and we do steam it for that one, but we just do it barely instead. So the other thing I've been thinking about looking into a little bit more is sort of steaming, but in the Instant Pot or the pressure cooker, just notoriously being able to make other things, tender and softer faster without that other process. But I have to look into that still. So you
had a slide the other day that, basically had one then I'm going to butcher the title of it, but you had one side that's, list of vegetables and fruits that are safe, I guess. And then you had the other side that was like, hey, stay away. And one of them was kale. And every, probably 4 times a week, I get this organic kale. I throw it into a blender with some other stuff and wolf down basically a kale shake. And I'm thinking, maybe I need to change that based on what you said. So kind of walk us through that whole scenario as well.
Things that are higher. Yes, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So that's something that I frequently, I keep a little wallet card of it actually, just so I can remember. So I try to always be sensitive, to our budget, but also to my clients and patients about, what things, if we could all buy all organic all the time, that'd be great, but it's just not realistic for very many families. So there's a list that is the Clean 15 are the things that are these in general have less, they are either grown or sprayed with less pesticides or have a covering over them, like a peel or something that protects the actual food more from that kind of toxin, so that if you need to choose to not buy organic on something, that those would be the ones you would choose to buy regular. And then the Dirty Dozen are the ones that you really, should try and buy organic because they just have so much exposure to pesticide in the way that they're grown or the soil that they're in or all of the above. So yeah, it's not that the food itself is bad. It's more a choice of which ones are more important to buy organic versus generic.
I think
So have at your kale.
as long as it's organic. I think grapes were on that Dirty Dozen and strawberries and some other things as well.
Yeah. And those are porous things, right? They don't have, whereas avocados have an exterior that is not as porous. So it makes sense.
Back to vegetables again. Top 3 in terms of nutrition.
Depends on the nutrition goal. So for example, back to the iron stores and anemia, I think, those dark leafy greens are huge for that. So, and at Optimal Bio, that's something we deal with a lot is, some low or high iron stores or anemia. And, so putting, I have a kid with it too. We put spinach or kale or both in his smoothies. And I think it's just, the dark leafy things. The more chlorophyll, the more colorful things are, the more nutrients are in them. That's just the way it works. But I also, I talk to them about it a lot in terms of eating the rainbow, which we've all heard. But, trying to get as much diversity in is really, they actually, the nutrients work, not just this one's high in iron or this one's high in vitamin C. They interact with each other. So food combining is something that I'm learning more about. I don't know a lot about it yet, but I'm very fascinated to learn where when you combine different foods, you actually absorb the nutrients from each of them better, depending on what you eat them with. So that's another thing that I think is really interesting that I'm kind of trying to look into, but what you eat together matters.
Getting back to vegetables again, the broccoli stalks, the kale stalks. I always thought that was the most nutritious part of the plant. But then I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast, and he had a nutrition person on, and he was talking about all plants have been developed basically to be poisonous. Otherwise, if everything just people eat them all the time, they can't reproduce, right? So there were toxins in the leaves, per example. And then he goes, if you really get down to the stalk, then that's really where the toxins are. So, I'm listening to him, I'm thinking, man, I just got to eat the leaves. I can't, eat that stalk. So what do you say to that?
I mean, so take broccoli, for example, there are different nutrients in the stalk than there are up in the floret part of it. And so it would be a bummer to not eat both. The same is true of asparagus. And so when you have a big change in texture like that, there's a reason. There's different nutrients in it. And again, it goes back to where your food is sourced. So if it's grown in super dirty soil or sprayed with a lot of stuff, just like our bodies, every plant has its own filtration system. It's going to push its toxins somewhere. And usually the most peripheral part is where that will go. But it really depends on the plant, on the vegetable for sure. And again, there's good nutrients in both pieces. So it's one of those weighing the risk benefit thing. I certainly wouldn't avoid eating all the stalks of everything. Just buy it from a better place.
You kind of gave a political answer there. So if you're buying kale, are you eating that stalk or not?
So I don't like the way that it tastes. The way we do kale is usually like we take most of the stalk off, not like the pieces, in the leaves, but like the harder tip there. And then we put it in a bowl with like a little bit of avocado oil, and kind of, if you massage it, it breaks up the fibers of the kale. And then we put a little bit of sea salt and a little bit of lemon, and then we just kind of lightly saute it. And that's the way we usually eat it. The only other way we usually eat it is in a salad for the adults. My kids won't eat kale salads unless it's cooked, but I can throw it in their smoothies.
It seemed like kale came out of nowhere too in the last 5 years. Everybody kind of knew about it in the past.
I know. Yeah. All these trends.
Yeah. And I think before that, Brussels sprouts. So is that a marketing push, or is that just people getting smarter about what's good and what's bad?
I think it's influencers. It's like, who's eating what? I opened my Instacart app the other day, and it's like Lizzo, the singer. And it's the weirdest thing. She's in her bathtub, and it's like, what's in Lizzo's grocery cart? I'm like, I don't care. So that's a little odd. I think it's all about like what other people or famous people are doing becomes this trend, and the influencer thing is true. I mean, sometimes it's great. You get to learn about something new or hear about something you wouldn't have known about otherwise. But
wanted to talk about next was food as a healing agent. So let's say, a person has a kid or an adult has just a common cold. What would be some of the meal recommendations you would do for your kids, let's say, if they had a cold, but they had a good appetite still?
I mean, I'm a big believer in kind of listening to your body. So sometimes I think within reason what they're craving is exactly what they probably need. So I try to listen to that. We definitely avoid all dairy when we're sick, and a lot of things that are inflammatory, just because your whole system's already inflamed. If they have a cough, we do a lot of honey, a lot of, just the basics like warm water and honey or tea and honey stuff. Honey is a natural cough suppressant. So we do a lot of that. I think we try to just do, give them as much I'm not a big believer that you need excesses and excesses of protein, but when your body's trying to heal or fight something and you need those energy stores, then we kind of push the protein and not have kind of those sides of whatever starches or kind of the more carbs. They just are kind of empty energy for them. So I would say protein, I would say garlic and ginger. We usually soak chopped up garlic and ginger in a jar of honey, and we let it sit for a couple of weeks so that it really kind of does its magic. And then I can try. Some of them will take a spoonful of that, but my husband and I take that. I mean, they're on their vitamins. We try to do the smoothies a lot then too, because I can get a lot of more nutrients in. So we will do kind of more heavier water and veggie-based smoothies instead of more of the fruit and dairy milk type. But those are the basic things. I mean, I think most people crave warmth and simplicity, not like lots of spices and things when you're not feeling well. So we just kind of listen to them. But those are the big ones.
All right. So tell me about this honey recipe. Like, what does it taste like at the end? How long do you have to let it sit? And kind of, if you're doing a cooking class right now, walk us through the how you do that.
It's so simple. It's funny, my husband and I went on a date night to this herbalist in Denver where it was like, the beginning of when I was learning about kind of making some of your own things at home. And she was like, come learn how to make your own, cold and cough support. And so we're like, okay. So we did that. We're weird. Those are our date nights. But
hey, whatever works.
Went to this herbalist's office. Yeah. And basically we just cut up like fresh ginger and fresh garlic. And we left it in like fairly big chunks and mixed it in with honey and in a jar where invert it like every day for a couple of weeks. And then we let it sit. I think it was 6 weeks or 8 weeks. It was a wow. But it's amazing. It's so good. I mean, it's not that fun when you don't feel well to bite into a giant chunk of garlic, but the ginger I love biting into. And I guess it's one of those things where it works, so you don't care. It's soothing and immediately.
Does the honey dissolve the garlic and ginger, or is it chunky when you're eating it? And then does the honey overpower the taste of the garlic and the ginger?
It helps. I wouldn't say overpower, but yeah, it's kind of that mix of sweet, savory, I guess.
So where do you fall on the whole in your nutrition and cooking in terms of proteins? Fish, chicken, beef, pork, all that stuff. What do you recommend there? And
so we only buy grass-fed organic beef products for sure, and all organic chicken. We try to avoid pork. I wish we ate more fish. Coming from Colorado in a landlocked state, it was hard to find fresh. And I sort of thought moving here, we would have better access to it, which we do and we don't. So they also didn't grow up eating it, neither did I. So we're learning. I've only recently learned over the last few years to start liking some more seafood. But we'll make salmon and we love making paella. That's one way I can sneak some seafood in because they love that. And for a while, when we were living in Colorado, as far as animal stuff, we had our own chickens for a little while, which was really, really fun. I wanted the kids to see kind of and remember that, your food actually comes from an animal that someone takes care of or doesn't take care of, and how important that process is. And so we had chickens for a couple of years, and that was fun to kind of see, depending on what we fed them, the color of their yolk changed and the taste of the eggs changed and things like that. So here we aren't allowed to have chickens, but we try to, there's a couple of farms around here where we'll either go or get a delivery from them for bone broth and eggs and meat and stuff like that. I'm looking for a good produce CSA around here too. But as far as meat, my husband loves bison, so he has that once a week probably. And then we have beef once or twice a week, and then chicken. And most of the time, we don't eat deli meats. Usually we try not to eat processed deli meats, which is complicated when you're packing lunches, but that's okay. We do this thing called Buddha Bowls where, every few weeks we'll kind of do a Sunday where we make 3 different proteins, 3 different vegetables, 3 different sauces, and then 3 different sides. So maybe it's quinoa, lentils, beans, something like that. And then we'll make grilled chicken, some ground beef, and whatever, some salmon. And then we'll have a pesto, a salsa, and a dairy-free tzatziki or something like that, or kind of an Asian sauce. And we just make it all at once, and then you can mix and match things. So sometimes it'll be bison and sweet potato and green beans. And then the next day you can mix it up and make it a taco or whatever. So we try to make those things ahead of time and then put them in and just remix it. And then everybody can have what they want without me having to make multiple things.
And pork, is that because of nutrition, cleanliness, or is that religious, or or you just don't like it?
It's mostly about the treatment of it's not great for us anyway, but pigs are so smart. And not that only smart animals deserve better treatment, but it's just hard once you know what you know about them. So the problem with that is everybody loves bacon, right? So we'll have that on occasion as a treat. But just in general, I think it's the salt, it's what they eat is not great. And also just the cruelty aspect of it is hard.
Because there really aren't free-range pigs like there are free-range chickens and cows and all. There are. It's just harder. Yeah, it's certainly not that you can really buy in the store that I know of. And we did try going as a family. We went vegetarian for a year, and I loved it because I had to think outside the box and start making new recipes and thinking up new things and trying new things, all of us. For us, especially my husband works in the hospital. He doesn't really get very many breaks. So, you eat vegetarian, you got to eat more frequently. And that just was really hard on everybody in terms of we were hungry all the time. We probably didn't do it completely right, but it really gave us some great new recipes, and it was fun. I love my protein, my animals. So going vegetarian for a year I couldn't do it. I wouldn't even try.
Yeah. I think it was a challenge after my class to just see, but yeah.
Obviously you have kids, you're human, you travel, you're going to get food on the go every once in a while. So if you have to treat yourself, I guess, in a weird kind of way, or if you have to go get something on the go, what do you recommend?
Until we moved here, they had, sounds crazy. I'm really not this uptight about it. It just worked out for a while. They had never been through a drive-through besides Starbucks until we moved here. So they have not had maybe they've had McDonald's once in the airport when we were about to miss a flight and we grabbed pancakes or something, but they didn't eat like eggs or meat at McDonald's. So I guess the treat would be like they would love for me to stop and let them have like a breakfast sandwich from Starbucks, which that they'll do it. It's not any different really, from any other drive-through, but for some reason it's just been easier to make things kind of strict boundaries on that kind of stuff. When I was growing up, my parents and my aunt and uncle, I remember like they would take us and our cousins to the mountains, and on the way up we had to go to 3, sometimes 4 different stops because everybody wanted a different fast food option. So I just knew like there's no way I'm doing that. But yeah, I mean, we'll stop at the gas station and see what we can find if we need to. And if, there's Starbucks everywhere, which isn't great, but that's kind of the one that we go to.
Do you have an experience Chick-fil-A since you've been south?
I have, and they have. It's sort of unavoidable. We go to a party and someone has like the party tray of the nuggets. And of course, it's like incredibly delicious, but we don't go just us. If somebody else is offering it or gives it to them or whatever, I don't care, which I guess is part of why I'm pretty strict about stuff at home, is so that I don't worry so much. If they go to a birthday party or to a friend's house, like I'm not going to tell them they can't have whatever's being served. So it just...
So what about nutritional desserts? Obviously, fruit's better than cake and what have you, but if there's no fruit option, what do you recommend?
When they were younger, they used to have fun making their own popsicles and stuff out of leftover smoothies, but they don't seem to love that so much anymore. I mean, we do desserts on special occasions. It's not a part of our everyday, for sure. I didn't grow up eating it every day either, so it just doesn't really occur to me. But I would say we'll do like strawberries and whipped cream, or my daughter loves to bake, so she'll make cookies. I would say it's mostly cookies, or like I'll make like banana bread or pumpkin bread or something like that. But it's just not really much of a sweets, especially after dinner or anything, family. Not opposed to it. We all love chocolate.
It's Christmas and you get assaulted with, lots of different desserts.
Right.
So.
Right. Yep. Peppermint bark, for sure.
It's almost as bad as candy corn in my world.
I know, but I have more of that savory, like the Chex Mix will have me in big trouble, but the sweets, I don't really have like the sweet tooth, but.
What about nuts? You rank a cashew, a peanut, or an almond,
Mm-hmm.
What do you go for first from a nutritional standpoint?
So we had everybody in our household do a food sensitivity thing, because one of the things I realized was that different nuts are really inflammatory to different people. And so it was kind of a bummer because it turned out that everybody's like favorite nut was the one that they came back more sensitive to. Sort of regret doing it, I guess. So I think that's more important, and it's not so much the nutrient of one nut over the other, but again, where they come from, and also who's eating them. But like I don't know, mostly we use nuts to make our nut milk. And by that, I'm not sitting here with like cheesecloth, squeezing it and making homemade milk that way. I bought this thing that's so awesome called the Almond Cow. It's basically like a blender for making nut milks. And so I do that with cashews. I do that with almonds. I do it with seeds. And so mostly we do that. Like I love pine nuts in salad, and we put cashews in a good like quinoa cabbage salad. My kids will take almonds to school sometimes. They can be inflammatory to everybody. So they're great in terms of like we were talking about the food combining thing. Like you should always eat a fruit with a seed or a nut for better nutrition absorption and for more fiber and all of those things. But I don't know that we have like specific ones we eat or avoid.
It's called the Almond Cow?
Mm-hmm. It's awesome. It literally takes like 2 minutes, and you just put the nuts in a basket and you fill it with water and you hit a button. But I've been making coffee creamer with it too, which is awesome. And that requires using cashew because they get like heavier and creamier milk. But then you can make all sorts of different flavored creamers, which has been fun. We just add like a little honey or syrup or nutmeg or pumpkin spice or whatever.
Wow. Yeah, because we were making our own almond milk for a while, but it was a process, and I'll have to look into that.
It is a process. Yeah. And the thing about almond milk, I guess that's a really good one in terms of, nutrition and shopping and all of those things, is that with very few exceptions, when you grab a bottle of almond milk, like it has between like 1 and 10 almonds actually in there. And you're really not getting what you're paying for. And it's so expensive. There's a brand that I like called Malk, MALK, which is better, but it's expensive. So buying the almond cow and then just doing it ourselves has been a huge money saver, but it's also just more fun.
So obviously you're you're at Optimal Bio now, and you're placing people with BHRT, the all natural bioidentical pellet. And so how did your testosterone journey go? How did you eventually land here to do this?
Sure. I knew that the two things I really wanted were something that were in alignment with everything that I've been learning and believing. And I knew I was not going to go back to like a traditional practice. I also, though, as I said before, really like procedures and using my like hands-on work. And so this is perfect for that. But I also was looking into it like we all were for ourselves. Now my youngest is 10 and I'm like, why am I this tired? And this can't be normal. It just... the brain fog is crazy, and I was looking for solutions for myself and for my husband. And so it just was a culmination of all the things we needed as a family, and things that, I was looking for professionally, and a place where I could learn, but know that I was with like-minded people. And it was perfect.
And obviously you feel better now?
I do. I had two rounds of pellets. And I'm still kind of trying to figure out what my like optimal dose is for sure. But yes, I feel so much better. And I sleep now, which is amazing.
And you need your sleep with 3 kids, right?
Yeah. I really do. Yep.
Yeah, I think I was reluctant, for a while. My wife was on it first, and, then I did it. And I do think once you start it, you get into a rhythm, with your labs, and not one size fits all. Some people may go every 6 months, some people may go every 4 months. But at the end of the day, it's at Optimal Bio, it's customized to you. And especially with your talent and all the other providers' talents of, actually making the placement, it's a lot different now than it was, 3 or 4 years ago.
No, I love it. It's a great combination of getting to, I love doing the actual little mini procedure, but I just love the environment of like, we're like the presentation yesterday, we're always like kind of being challenged to learn and then to share what we've learned. And I thrive on any environment where I can always be learning things. So in that way, it's perfect. And what we're learning is just so important. I think it takes a lot of bravery as a healthcare professional of any kind to be open-minded and to look into things that maybe you haven't heard of before or contradict even what you were told or learned. And you kind of have to let your guard down and decide that you want to see truth and the whole picture. And once you do, you can't unsee what you've seen. So it's pretty life-changing once you open your eyes to what's really going on with your body and what options there really are. And that's the best gift, I think. I
think too, it's probably hard for you sometimes as a provider, because some people I think come in and, they get placed and they think that's all they have to do, right? They don't have to go change their diet, or they don't have to have some weight issues. They don't have to go exercise. Do you find that to be challenging? And, if so, how do you convince them or encourage them, I guess, to, do everything and not just do the placement?
So I always talk about it, like to set realistic expectations, especially like in our initial consultations. And, I frequently use the saying of like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And it's one of those things where like, if you want to feel the way that your goals are, this will help you from the top down approach. So like, I kind of describe it as like an umbrella. If you can balance your body from the top down, then all along the way, there's so many less interventions that need to happen, whether that's medicine or doctor's visits or whatever, illnesses, things like that. You're less likely to have all of those things. But if you if you're completely sedentary and your metabolism is super, super low, then so is like your circulatory system. And so you can put whatever you want in your body, but if it's not circulating the way that it should, you're not getting what you should out of it. And the same is, if you are sabotaging the effects of having, this, I kind of think it's like a clean slate. So if you take these all natural hormones and then you eat like crap, you're still going to feel like crap, regardless of whether the pellets are doing their job or not, because you're super inflamed. And so it's one of those things where if you really want to see the effects of them, then you've got to do your part too. And it's one big picture. So there's never an easy, there's never a one thing that fixes everything. And I do think, you can really sabotage a lot of your work by what you eat and how you move.
No, and unfortunately, I think in traditional medicine, you worked in it for a number of years. The expectation that's been set from the provider and also from the patient is, I need a solution. I need a one-stop solution. And, that works for the most part when you're prescribing an antibiotic for an infection, but for everything else, it doesn't, right? So, but unfortunately, that's where we are at this point in time. So it must, like I said, people come to Optimal Bio and, they're coming from traditional medicine. They're obviously not happy with what's happened there. So they're coming to us. So hopefully they're coming with a more open mind, about things. But at the end of the day, if, for 50, 60 years, you've been, programmed with an expectation of, this drug is going to fix me.
I think it's changing. People are really learning. So many people will say now things that they never would have said in terms of, we went from doctor knows best always. You never, my parents and grandparents certainly never would have challenged their doctor on something or asked questions even. And now, you're encouraged to be an advocate for yourself and do your own homework and ask questions. And that should tell you whether you have a provider who's a good fit for you or not. If they encourage that and want to hear what you have learned or want to answer your questions, then awesome. But if there either isn't time for that or they kind of don't want to have a discussion about it, they just want to tell you what to do, that's kind of a red flag for me. So I think, it's a system issue. I didn't have the time in my previous jobs to sit down and get into all of this. That's why functional medicine is so important, because the premise of it is really getting a history from people and understanding each part of their life and their history to really get to the bottom of what is at the core of their health. The system is not set up for that in a traditional system. It's not that anybody doesn't care. They do not have the time, and that's really hard. So it's nice to kind of be able to get a bigger picture at Optimal Bio of the whole person. And even though we're focused just on, thyroid and pellets, we do get to get a really big picture of what's going on with our patients.
Well, thank you, for being here today. Thank you for sharing your story with us. I certainly learned a lot about cooking today and nutrition. So to me, it was fascinating. As always, with all of our guests, we ask them to give us at least 5 takeaways for the listeners. So I'm going to throw it back to you and let's hear what you have to say.
So the first one is travel. And when you travel, learn about food, because when we go places, it's such a window for learning about culture and history, also about learning about other people and languages. But I have found that wherever we go on vacation, if we bother to take a cooking class or talk to somebody about, what traditional foods are and cooking methods are, we learn so much more, not only about nutrients and about health, but about values and culture. And so that is a huge one for me. And then the second one is simplicity. I just think, our lives are busy, our schedules are busy, and most of the time people have the best intention. I want to make these changes in my life, but I don't have time, which I empathize with. But I am kind of there's only one answer to that. You got to simplify some things to make it work. If it's a priority, it's a priority. And so sometimes, when you're trying to get your health back on track or your family's health back on track, you may need to cut some things out for a while and really simplify your schedule so that you have some space in your mind to think the best about what would work for you and what you really want and need. And if you never have the space in your life for that, those ideas don't come to you. The third I would say is don't be afraid to try some of those homemade pantry ideas and to try and get more preservatives out of your pantry. It doesn't have to be, hours and hours of of work, and you don't have to have all these fancy devices. There's, quite a few things that people can do from home. They're really easy, and it saves you money too. And so that would be the third one. The fourth one is, I think, particularly pertaining to women, just having, had babies and trying to get back in shape and all of that stuff. I happen to have had a lot of chronic back pain through my life. And I think that I wish I would have kept moving at a much higher level and not kind of done these dips after or during pregnancies or after, keeping a more consistent basis for movement, flexibility, and exercise would have really served me well. So that would be 4, right? 5 would be looking at the things in your kitchen, I guess, and looking at what sort of products you have and doing a little research to just try. When you replace something, you don't need to go out and replace your whole kitchen, but if it's time to buy new pans or it's time to buy new plates or whatever, do a little research first and find out what would be healthier, not just the most fashionable thing that you can find.
Great stuff. Well, thank you again for everything, and I look forward to continue working with you, and happy holidays.
Thank you.
This has been a production of Optimal Bio. Optimal Bio is CEO Tyler Brannon, podcast host and partner Jim Baker, medical director Greg Brannon, production assistance by Core Media, Beth Grabencourt, administrator, Kevin Duthu, executive producer. The podcast can be found on our website, optimalbio.com, on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Our theme song is Sunwave by Paradiso, provided by Epidemic Sound.